poor man gave his last meal to a stranger. Years later, that moment returned. The man stood still in front of the small food stall. As the evening light faded, his stomach tight and hollow, his hands cold around the coins in his pocket. Steam rose from a single pot, carrying the smell of rice and boiled vegetables into the air. It was the only warm thing left on the street. His name was Daniel. He was thin, not just in body, but in everything else too. His jacket worn at the elbows, his shoes split at the sides, his face lined far beyond his age. Hunger followed him like a shadow. Some days it whispered, other days it screamed. Tonight it pressed hard. Daniel counted his money again. It was enough for one meal, one small plate, the last food he would have until morning. He ordered quietly and waited. While the vendor scooped rice into a paper bowl, Daniel felt relief and shame at the same time. Relief because he would eat. Shame because eating once a day felt like a victory now. He took the bowl and walked a few steps away, sitting on the low concrete wall near the bus stop. The street was almost empty. A few cars passed. Somewhere a train horn sounded. Daniel lifted the bowl, letting the warmth reach his fingers. Then he noticed the stranger. The man stood under the broken bus stop light a few feet away. He was taller than Daniel, but bent forward slightly as if carrying something heavy inside. His coat was too big, his hair uncombed, his eyes fixed on the ground. He looked lost, not just on the street, but in the world. Daniel tried not to stare. In the city, staring could lead to trouble, but something about the man's stillness caught him. He wasn't begging. He wasn't moving. He just stood there, breathing slowly like someone waiting for a reason to keep going. Daniel lowered his bowl. The smell of food filled the space between them. The stranger lifted his head. Their eyes met for half a second. The man looked away, fast, embarrassed, like a child caught wanting something he knew he could not have. Daniel felt a familiar ache, not just in his stomach, but deeper. How many times had he looked at food like that? How many times had he hoped someone would not notice? The man took a small step back as if to put distance between himself and temptation. His voice was barely a sound. Sorry, he said, though no one had accused him of anything. Daniel swallowed. His spoon hovered above the rice. The narrator might ask you now, what would you do standing there with your last meal of the day? Would you look away and protect the little you had left? Daniel told himself to eat quickly, to focus, to survive. Tomorrow was already uncertain enough, but his eyes went back to the stranger. The man's hands were shaking. Whether from cold or hunger, Daniel could not tell. A bus approached in the distance, its lights growing brighter. The moment felt small, ordinary, and heavy. Daniel looked down at the bowl again. This was it. His last food. Once it was gone, there would be nothing until morning. He took a breath, and in that breath a choice waited. Daniel lived in a narrow room above an old laundry shop on the edge of the city. The stairs up to it smelled like damp soap and rusted metal. The hallway light outside his door flickered most nights like it was tired too. Inside the room had just enough space for a thin mattress, a small table with one wobbly leg, and a second-hand kettle that worked only if Daniel held the plug at the right angle. One window faced a brick wall. When it rained, water slid down the glass like slow tears. In winter, wind found its way in through the cracks. He didn't complain out loud. He had learned that complaining did not fill a stomach. Daniel was 38, but he looked older. Years of hard work had leaned his shoulders forward and dulled the shine in his eyes. He had once had a stable job at a warehouse loading boxes, driving a small forklift, joking with coworkers during lunch breaks. Then the warehouse closed. After that, the jobs came and went, day labor cleaning sites, moving furniture, washing dishes. Some weeks he found work. Other weeks he didn't. Food was the first thing to suffer. On the days he worked, he bought something cheap: rice noodles, a small piece of chicken if he was lucky. He stretched it as far as he could. On days he didn't work, he drank water and told himself it was just a light day. He learned to move slowly so his body wouldn't demand more than he could give. His phone was old and had a cracked screen. He kept it mostly for job calls. He didn't scroll social media much. Seeing other people's full plates and happy faces felt like looking through a window at a world he didn't belong to anymore. Daniel had a sister, Mariah, who lived across town with her two kids. She used to ask him to come over for dinner, but Daniel went less and less. Not because he didn't love them, but because he hated showing up empty-handed. He hated the look in Mariah's eyes when she tried not to pity him. Still, she cared. One Thursday evening, Daniel stopped by her apartment building after a short shift unloading produce at a market. His arms ached. His stomach was already empty again. He carried a small bag of bruised apples the market owner had let him take. Mariah opened the door and her face softened right away. "Danny," she said, using the old nickname from childhood. "Come in. You're freezing." "I'm fine," Daniel said, forcing a small smile. "Just passing through." Mariah took the apples from his hands. "You got these for the kids. They were going to throw them out," Daniel said. "But yeah, for the kids." Two small faces appeared behind Mariah's legs. Jade and Leo. Jade was 7 with bright eyes. Leo was 4 and always in motion. "Uncle Danny," Jade yelled, running forward to hug him. Leo copied her, wrapping his arms around Daniel's thigh like a tiny tree clinging to a trunk. Daniel laughed softly and patted their heads. For a moment, the tightness in his chest loosened. Mariah watched him carefully. "Did you eat?" she asked. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, earlier." Mariah didn't believe him. Daniel could see it, but she didn't push right away. She turned toward the small kitchen. "I made stew." "Sit, please." Daniel hesitated. "Mara, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said, firmer now. "I want to." "Sit." Daniel sat at the small table. The apartment was modest but warm. A blanket lay on the couch. Crayon drawings were taped to the wall. The smell of stew filled the air, rich and comforting like a memory. Mariah placed a bowl in front of him. The steam rose into his face. His stomach clenched suddenly, waking up like it had been asleep to protect him. Daniel tried to act normal. He lifted the spoon. Mariah sat across from him with her arms folded. "Daniel," she said softly, "you're losing weight again." "I'm okay," Daniel replied. "You always say that." Her voice shook a little. "But I'm your sister. I can see it." Daniel stared at the stew, afraid that if he looked at her, he might break. "I don't want you worried," he said. "I'm already worried," Mariah said. "Do you still have that room above the laundry?" "Yes. And rent." Daniel nodded once. "I paid this month." Mariah's eyes narrowed. How Daniel swallowed. "I picked up extra shifts." Mariah leaned forward. "Danny, don't lie to me." Daniel didn't answer. The silence was heavy for a few seconds, filled only by the sound of Leo playing with a toy car on the floor. Mariah spoke again, quieter. "You can stay here, you know, just until you get back on your feet." Daniel shook his head quickly. "No, you already have enough. We have space," she insisted. "The kids would love it." Daniel forced a smile and looked at Jade. She was watching him with careful eyes, like she could sense the grown-up sadness. Daniel didn't want to bring his struggle into their home. He didn't want the kids to overhear late-night worries about bills and food. He took a bite of stew, slow and grateful. "I'm fine," he said again, but this time the words felt weak even to him. Mariah sighed. "At least let me pack you something," she said. "Some bread, some rice." "No." Daniel's voice came out sharper than he meant. He softened quickly. "No, Mari. Please. Keep it for the kids." Mariah's eyes filled a little, and she looked away. "You always do this," she whispered. Daniel didn't reply because it was true. Even when he had little, he always tried to leave others with more. When he left the apartment later, Mariah slipped a small plastic container into his bag anyway. Daniel felt it and stopped at the door. Mariah lifted her chin. "Don't argue," she said. "Just take it." Daniel held the bag straps tightly. "Thank you," he said quietly. Outside, the city air was colder. Daniel walked toward his room, the container warm against his side. He didn't open it right away. He just walked slowly, listening to his footsteps. His life was simple now. Wake up early, search for work, do what he could, return to a quiet room, eat what he had, sleep, repeat. And yet, even in that routine, Daniel still tried to notice people. He still held doors for strangers. He still helped older neighbors carry groceries up the stairs. He still gave away small things when he could. There was an elderly man named Mr. Han who lived downstairs. Sometimes Daniel saw him struggling with bags from the discount store. Daniel would hurry over. "Let me," Daniel would say. Mr. Han would frown. "You're always helping. What do you get out of it?" Daniel would shrug. "Nothing. Just, it's the right thing." One evening, Mr. Han handed Daniel a small bag of oranges. "Take," he said gruffly. "You look tired." Daniel hesitated. "No, it's okay." Mr. Han shoved it into his hands. "Take. Don't talk." Daniel thanked him and went upstairs, feeling both grateful and embarrassed. That was his life, always balancing pride and need, always trying to stay human in a world that made poor people feel invisible. And then came that night at the bus stop. Daniel had been paid only a little for a short cleaning job. The money was barely enough for rent and one meal. He could have saved the meal money and eaten the container Mariah gave him, but he had already finished it the day before. He told himself he would buy something cheap and make it last. So he went to the small food stall near the bus stop. The vendor recognized him. "Same as usual?" the vendor asked. Daniel nodded. "Yeah." The vendor scooped rice and a few vegetables into a paper bowl. The portion wasn't big, but it was warm. It was the last meal Daniel would have that day, maybe the only one. He took it and sat on the low wall near the bus stop, ready to eat. And that was when he saw the stranger again, standing under the broken light, too still, too quiet, looking like someone who hadn't eaten in a long time. Daniel's spoon hovered. His stomach begged him to hurry. But something deeper in him, something stubborn and alive, refused to look away. And as the bus lights approached in the distance, Daniel felt the choice tightening around his chest like a door slowly closing, asking him which side he wanted to be on. The stranger's name was Michael, though Daniel did not know that then. To Daniel, he was just a man standing under a broken light, wearing a coat that had once been expensive, but now looked tired like its owner. Michael hadn't planned to be at that bus stop. Earlier that day, he had walked for hours without a clear direction. The city felt too loud, too fast. Every sound pressed against his head, horns, voices, footsteps, until he felt like he might break apart if he stayed still for too long. He had lost his job 3 weeks earlier. Not just any job, his job. Michael had been a project manager at a tech company, the kind of position people admired when they heard the title. He had an office with glass walls, a steady salary, and a calendar full of meetings. People asked for his approval. People waited for his emails. And then one morning, the company called everyone into a room and told them about restructuring. Michael remembered the exact words. He remembered how calm the manager's voice sounded, as if they were discussing weather. He remembered the way his own hands shook when he packed his things into a cardboard box. At first, he told himself it would be fine. He had savings. He had experience. He would find something else. But then the days stretched on. Interviews led to polite emails. Polite emails led to silence. His savings drained faster than he expected, rent bills, old debts he had ignored when money was good. Michael stopped answering calls from friends. He didn't want to explain. He didn't want their advice or their pity. At night, he lay awake in his apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every mistake he thought he had made. He blamed himself for trusting the company. He blamed himself for not saving more. He blamed himself for believing that stability was permanent. Food became an afterthought. At first, he skipped lunch, then dinner. He drank coffee to keep the hunger away. He told himself it was temporary, but tonight he had reached a different place. His landlord had sent a final warning. His phone buzzed with a low balance alert. His head felt light when he stood up too fast. Michael left his apartment with no clear plan. He walked until his feet hurt. He walked until the city lights blurred together. He walked because stopping felt dangerous. By the time he reached the bus stop, his stomach ached sharply. Not the dull hunger of a missed meal, but the deep twisting pain of something long ignored. He stood under the broken light because it was the only place nearby that felt quiet. The bus schedule board flickered missing letters. The night air cut through his coat. Then he smelled food. The scent hit him suddenly warm and simple rice, vegetable, salt. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't special, but it felt like a memory of safety. Michael turned his head and saw the man sitting a few feet away with a paper bowl in his hands. The man looked thin, worn, not someone with extra to spare. Michael felt a wave of shame rush through him. He looked away immediately. He hadn't meant to stare. He hadn't meant to want. His stomach betrayed him with a quiet sound. Sorry, Michael muttered, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe he was apologizing for being weak, for being hungry, for being seen. He shifted his weight, stepping back slightly, trying to put space between himself and the smell. He told himself he didn't deserve it. He told himself this man had his own problems. Michael wrapped his arms around himself. His hands trembled. He tried to focus on breathing slowly. Inside, his thoughts spiraled. How had it come to this? Just months ago, he had eaten lunch with coworkers complaining about bland cafeteria food. Just months ago, he had ordered takeout without checking his bank balance. Now he was standing at a bus stop trying not to think about rice. He didn't notice Daniel watching him closely. Daniel saw the way the stranger avoided his eyes. He saw the stiffness in his shoulders. He recognized the posture not of a beggar, but of someone who had fallen and didn't know how to ask for help. Daniel didn't know Michael's story. He didn't know about the job or the apartment or the unpaid bills. He didn't know that Michael felt like a failure wearing a stranger's skin. All Daniel knew was what he could see: a man who was hungry and ashamed. The bus came closer. Its headlights washed over the street, then passed without stopping. Michael exhaled slowly. He hadn't even checked the route. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he didn't want to go back to an empty apartment. He glanced sideways again just for a moment. Daniel's bowl was still full. The spoon rested inside untouched. Their eyes met again. This time Michael didn't look away as fast. Something in Daniel's face, quiet, steady, tired but kind, made him pause. Neither of them spoke. The city seemed to hold its breath. Two men stood side by side in the night, strangers, bound by the same simple need, both unaware that this small, silent moment was about to change the shape of their lives in ways neither could imagine. And as the bus stopped, light flickered above them, their paths finally fully crossed. Daniel's stomach growled softly, a sharp reminder that the bowl in his hands was all he had. He shifted on the low wall, feeling the cold concrete through his thin pants. The rice was still warm. Steam curled up and disappeared into the night. He looked at the stranger again. The man stood stiffly, eyes tired, hands clenched inside the sleeves of his coat. He was trying to be invisible. Daniel knew that feeling too well. Daniel lifted the spoon, then stopped. This is it, he thought. Once it's gone, it's gone. He pictured the long night ahead, the empty room, the way hunger would settle in and make sleep hard. He had done it before. He could do it again. But tonight felt different. The narrator might ask you quietly now, when you know exactly what you will lose, does that make kindness harder or more real? Daniel cleared his throat. His voice came out low and unsure. Hey. Michael looked up, startled. Yeah. Daniel held up the bowl slightly, then hesitated again. His fingers tightened around the paper edge. You want this? Michael froze. For a second, he didn't understand what he was hearing. Then his eyes dropped to the bowl. Oh, no, I'm fine, Michael said quickly. Really, I was just waiting for the bus. Daniel nodded slowly, not pushing. Okay. He looked down at the rice again. His stomach twisted painfully now as if it knew what was happening. He could still eat it. He could pretend he never asked. Daniel stood up. The movement surprised even him. He took one step closer and held the bowl out fully this time, both hands open. "It's okay," he said. "I already ate earlier." It was a lie, a small one meant to protect the stranger's pride. Michael shook his head. "I can't take your food." Daniel met his eyes. "It's my choice." There was a long pause. The night felt heavy between them. Michael's voice dropped. "I don't want to take something you need." Daniel's lips pressed together. For a moment the truth almost slipped out. He almost said, "This is all I have." He almost said, "I'll be hungry if you take it." Instead, he took a breath and said simply, "You look like you need it more right now." Michael's hands trembled as he reached out. He hesitated, then slowly accepted the bowl. His fingers brushed Daniel's by accident, and Daniel felt how cold they were. "Thank you," Michael whispered, like the words were fragile. "I mean it." Daniel nodded once. He stepped back, putting space between them so the moment wouldn't feel too big. Michael sat on the wall where Daniel had been moments before. He stared at the food for a few seconds like he was afraid it might disappear. Then he picked up the spoon. The first bite was slow. His shoulders dropped slightly as he swallowed. He closed his eyes for half a second, and Daniel saw something break open in his face. Not joy, but relief. Daniel turned away before it could hurt. He walked a few steps and leaned against the bus stop pole. His stomach tightened hard now, like it was angry with him. He pressed a hand against it and breathed through the pain. "It's fine," he told himself. "You've gone to bed hungry before." Behind him, Michael ate quietly. No talking, no rushing. Just the soft sound of spoon against paper. When the bowl was empty, Michael stood up. He held it carefully like it mattered. "I don't know how to say this," he said. "I didn't eat all day." Daniel looked at him surprised despite himself. Michael continued, eyes down. "I was in a bad place. Still am, I guess." Daniel nodded. "Yeah." Michael hesitated. Can I get your name, Daniel?" "Michael," he said. They stood there awkwardly, two strangers who had shared something too personal to ignore, but not enough to fully understand. The next bus arrived, doors opening with a hiss. Michael glanced at it, then back at Daniel. "I should go." Daniel nodded. "Take care." Michael paused. "I won't forget this," he said quietly. Daniel smiled faintly. "You don't have to." Michael stepped onto the bus and disappeared inside. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. Daniel stood alone under the broken light, his stomach empty, his hands cold, his body tired. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the hunger and the worry, there was a small, steady calm. He had given his last meal of the day away. He knew exactly what it cost him. And still, as he turned and began the long walk back to his room, Daniel felt at peace with the choice he had made. The night Daniel gave away his last meal passed slowly. Hunger woke him again and again, sharp and demanding. He lay on his thin mattress, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the hum of the city outside his window. A car passed. Someone laughed far away. Life went on. By morning his body felt weak, but his mind was clear. He got up, washed his face with cold water, and dressed for another day of searching. He didn't think about Michael much. Not in any special way. To Daniel it had been a moment, important yes, but finished. Life didn't leave much room for reflection when survival came first. The days turned into weeks. Daniel found a few short jobs here and there. One week he helped paint a storage unit. Another week he cleaned offices at night. Some days he ate once. Some days he ate twice and felt almost rich. Other days he drank water and slept early. He never expected anything to come back to him. When he passed the bus stop, he sometimes remembered the broken light and the paper bowl. But the memory faded like footprints in dust. New worries replaced it. His sister called more often. Daniel answered when he could. "You sound tired," Mariah said one evening. "Just work," Daniel replied. "You eating?" "Yes," he said, lying again. She sighed. "Danny, I know you. Don't disappear on me." "I won't," he promised. Months passed. The seasons shifted. Winter came, then softened into spring. Daniel's hair grew longer. His coat grew thinner. He learned which shops threw out bread at closing time and which didn't. He learned which employers paid on time and which made excuses. One morning he saw a small sign taped to a community board near the market: part-time maintenance worker needed. Apartment complex. Apply inside. The pay wasn't much, but it was steady. Daniel applied the same day. He got the job. It wasn't glamorous. He fixed leaky sinks, replaced light bulbs, swept stairwells, and took out trash. But it was regular work. The manager paid him every Friday. Daniel started to breathe a little easier. He bought groceries instead of single meals. Rice in a bag, eggs, bread, cheap soup. The fridge in his room was still small, but now it held more than emptiness. With steady work came small changes. Daniel stood straighter. He slept better. Hunger no longer ruled every thought, but he didn't forget what it felt like. He still helped Mr. Hahn downstairs. He still carried groceries for neighbors. He still shared what little extra he had. Once a young man moved into the building with nothing but a suitcase and a tired face. Daniel noticed him sitting on the stairs late at night. "You knew?" Daniel asked. The man nodded. "Yeah." "You hungry?" Daniel asked simply. The man hesitated, then nodded again. Daniel brought him a bowl of soup. It wasn't his last meal this time, but the feeling was the same. Years passed. Daniel moved into a slightly better room in the same neighborhood. It had a real window that faced the street. Sunlight came in during the mornings. He bought a small table that didn't wobble. He replaced his broken shoes. Life never became easy, but it became manageable. The memory of the stranger faded further. Daniel sometimes wondered what had happened to him. He hoped the man was okay. That was all. Michael, on the other hand, never forgot. From the moment he finished that bowl of rice, the world shifted for him. That night, Michael went home and slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The food warmed more than his body. It softened something inside him that had been hard with fear. The next morning, he woke up with a strange clarity. He still had problems, bills, uncertainty, fear. But he also had a memory that stayed with him like a quiet anchor, a man with nothing giving anyway. Michael stopped hiding. He called a former colleague he had avoided, then another. He told the truth. He listened instead of pretending. One call led to another. A short contract turned into a longer one. The work wasn't as prestigious as before, but it paid. He rebuilt slowly. Michael changed too. He stopped rushing. He stopped chasing status. He remembered what it felt like to stand under a broken light, ashamed and hungry. He started volunteering on weekends at a local food distribution center. At first, he packed boxes. Later, he helped organize deliveries. One afternoon, while handing out meals, he watched a thin man hesitate before accepting a plate. Michael smiled gently and said, "It's okay. Take it." The man took it. Michael went home that night and thought about Daniel. He remembered the quiet way Daniel had offered the food, the way he had lied without shame, the way he had stepped back letting Michael eat without watching. Michael didn't know Daniel's last name. He didn't know where he lived, but the memory followed him as the years passed. Michael's career grew again, but differently this time. He chose work that meant something to him. He turned down offers that felt empty. He started a small company focused on community housing projects and maintenance services, simple work that kept people employed and buildings livable. Success came slowly then steadily. By the time 5 years had passed, Michael was doing well. Not rich in the way magazines described, but stable, secure, respected. And still that night at the bus stop remained the moment he measured himself against. Daniel, meanwhile, believed the chapter of his life was closed. He stood in the courtyard of the apartment complex one afternoon, tightening a loose railing. Children played nearby. A woman waved at him from a balcony. Daniel waved back. He felt content, not happy in a loud way, just steady. Later that evening, as he locked up the maintenance room, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He frowned and answered. "Hello, hi," a voice said. "Is this Daniel?" "Yes. My name is Sarah. I'm calling from Horizon Living Services. We're opening a new maintenance facility nearby, and your name came highly recommended." Daniel blinked. "Recommended by who?" "There's someone who asked specifically if you consider meeting him," she said. "He remembers you from a long time ago." Daniel felt a strange tightening in his chest. "I don't think," she continued gently. "He said it involved a bus stop." Daniel's breath caught. The memory rushed back clear and sharp, the broken light, the paper bowl, the quiet man with shaking hands. Sarah added, "Would you be willing to come in for a conversation?" Daniel hesitated, then said, "Yes." He hung up and stood still for a long moment, staring at the locked door in front of him. Somewhere in the past, a small act he believed was forgotten was reaching back toward him. And Daniel, who had never expected anything in return, felt the first quiet pull of a story not yet finished. The building Michael chose for the meeting stood on a quiet street not far from the old bus stop. Daniel noticed that right away. He paused across the road, hands in his jacket pockets, and looked at the place for a few seconds before crossing. The sign on the glass door read, "Horizon Living Services." Clean letters, new paint, nothing flashy. Daniel wiped his shoes on the mat and stepped inside. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paper. A woman at the front desk smiled. "You must be Daniel," she said. "He's been waiting for you." Daniel nodded, suddenly unsure of what to do with his hands. He followed her down a short hallway. His footsteps echoed softly. At the end of the hall was a small meeting room with a window. Sunlight spilled across a simple table. A man stood near it, looking out at the street. When he turned around, Daniel's breath caught. It took a moment for the years to fall away, but then he saw it, the same eyes. Older now, calmer, but unmistakable, Michael, Daniel said before he could stop himself. Michael's face changed instantly. His mouth opened slightly, then curved into a smile that held relief, gratitude, and something close to disbelief. "You remember," Michael said softly. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I do." They stood there just looking at each other. The room felt very quiet. Michael stepped forward slowly, as if afraid the moment might break. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," he said. Daniel shrugged. "I was curious." Michael gestured to the chairs. "Please, sit." They sat across from each other. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Finally, Michael took a breath. "I've thought about that night more times than I can count." Daniel shifted in his seat. "It was just a meal." Michael shook his head. "No, it wasn't." He leaned forward, slightly resting his hands on the table. "That was the last thing you had. I know that now." Daniel's eyes dropped. He didn't deny it. Michael continued, voice steady but thick with feeling. "I went home and realized something that night. I had been so afraid of losing everything that I forgot what mattered. You had almost nothing, and you gave anyway." Daniel rubbed his thumb against his palm. "I didn't think about it that way." "I know," Michael said gently. "That's what made it matter." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small paper bowl. Old, creased, carefully kept. Daniel stared at it. "Is that I kept it?" Michael said. "It reminds me who I want to be." Daniel let out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and a sigh. "You didn't have to do all this." Michael smiled. "I know, but I wanted to." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, clean and clear. "I'm opening a new maintenance center," Michael said. "Fair pay, full benefits, steady hours. I want you to run it." Daniel looked up sharply. "Run it? You know the work. You know people," Michael said. "And I trust you." Daniel's throat tightened. Why me? Michael met his eyes. Because when it mattered most, you chose kindness. For a long moment, Daniel couldn't speak. Outside the window, a bus passed by. Daniel finally nodded, slow and sure. Okay, he said. I'll do it. Michael smiled, and in that smile was the echo of a quiet night, a broken light, and a simple meal that had traveled across years to return, changed but whole. They stood and shook hands. This time, both of them knew exactly what the moment meant. The room felt warmer after that. Daniel stood slowly still, holding the folder, like it might vanish if he let go. His hands trembled just a little. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Michael smiled gently. You don't have to say anything. Daniel took a breath. I never thought that night meant all this. Michael leaned back in his chair. That night meant I didn't feel invisible anymore. I didn't feel like a failure. Someone saw me when I couldn't see myself. Daniel's eyes stung and he looked away embarrassed. I was just hungry too, he said quietly. Michael nodded. I know. That's the part I can never forget. They talked for a long time after that. Not about business, not about titles, just life. Michael told Daniel everything: losing his job, the shame, the fear, the way the world had felt too heavy to carry. He spoke honestly without polishing the story. I stood there thinking I had hit the bottom, Michael said. And then you showed me there was still goodness left. Daniel listened, silent, steady. When it was Daniel's turn, he didn't dress his life up either. He talked about the laundry room apartment, the nights of hunger, the pride that kept him quiet. I didn't want to be a burden, Daniel said, so I tried to be useful instead. Michael shook his head slowly. You were never a burden. The words settled into Daniel in a way he hadn't expected. He had gone years without hearing anything like that. Later, Michael stood and walked to a small kitchenette in the corner of the office. He opened a cabinet and pulled out two simple bowls. From a pot on the counter, he ladled warm rice and vegetables. Daniel noticed his hands pause for a second before serving. Michael placed one bowl in front of Daniel and sat down with the other. I make this sometimes, he said. It reminds me. Daniel looked at the food. It was simple, plain, familiar. They ate together slowly. For Daniel, the moment felt like a circle closing. Years ago, he had stood hungry while someone else ate. Now he was eating full, steady scene. Michael watched him for a moment, then said quietly, You changed my life. Daniel shook his head. We both changed. After that day, things moved quickly, but not carelessly. Daniel started at the new facility within the month. The work was honest. The people were treated well. Michael visited often not as a boss, but as someone who cared. Daniel hired men and women who needed second chances, people who knew what it meant to struggle. He paid attention. He listened. One afternoon, a young worker named Luis stayed late fixing a broken door. Daniel brought him a sandwich. Luis hesitated. I'm okay, Daniel smiled. Eat. You'll work better. Luis ate grateful. Michael watched from a distance, his chest tight with emotion. He never forgot where it started. Years later, Daniel stood in a small kitchen, not rich but comfortable. Sunlight filled the room. He cooked dinner while laughter came from the living room. He was not alone anymore. And somewhere inside him, the hunger that had once shaped his days had softened, not because life was perfect, but because dignity had finally been returned to him. Two men, once strangers, now connected by a quiet truth. Kindness given without expectation has a way of finding its way home. On a quiet evening years later, Daniel stood at his kitchen stove stirring a pot of rice and vegetables. The window was open, letting in cool air and the sound of the street below. A bus passed brakes, hissing softly. The sound made him smile without knowing why. He turned off the stove and set the table for two. Michael arrived a few minutes later holding a loaf of bread under his arm. Smells good, he said. Daniel laughed. Same old food, best kind, Michael replied. They sat and ate together unhurried. No speeches, no memories spoken out loud. Just two men sharing a simple meal, equal now, steady in their lives. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, there was peace. Sometimes one small choice carries more weight than we can see. Kindness does not always come from abundance. Often it comes from sacrifice. When someone gives even while they are hungry, that act leaves a mark. It can travel through time, through hardship, through change. And one day it may return quietly, faithfully, to the hands that first gave it. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like the video. Share it with someone who believes in kindness, even when life is hard. And don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories that remind us what really matters. Thank you for watching.